Welcome into the PFF NFL Daily. Today discussing unfortunate injury news for a couple teams. Michael Thomas officially out for the New Orleans Saints for the rest of the season. And Rashod Bateman, wide receiver for the Baltimore Ravens, officially out for the rest of the season. So Sam, couple big name wide receivers out for the rest of the year. We're asking the question, which one is the bigger loss?
Man, absolute bummer. This happened within like half an hour of each other. They got
Yeah.
announced. Rashod Bateman has been dealing with a Liz Frank injury, and that's a pretty significant thing for a wide receiver. And then Michael Thomas has been dealing with this toe injury that was supposedly not too serious back in week 2. And then we haven't seen him since. And all of a sudden, he's supposedly not going to play for the rest of the season, according to the head coach. So massive blows for both teams. Thinking about it, though, I think either side is kind of okay. I think if you're trying to pick which one is the bigger issue, it's probably Baltimore and Rashod Bateman, because he is the kind of one proven commodity in that wide receiver room. But Mark Andrews is their alpha number one receiver, even if he's a tight end. Like, he's the go-to guy there. So as long as Mark Andrews is there and he's dealing with his own injuries, they can get by without Rashod Bateman. In New Orleans, we've already seen that rookie Chris Olave can kind of step in and be their number one receiver. And even independent of Michael Thomas, they've got some other weapons there. I think they can piece that thing together and be okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with you on both, right? I mean, I think both teams have other weapons. I'm leaning toward Bateman, though, as the bigger loss, in part because the poor Saints have been dealing, and poor Michael Thomas, dealing without Michael Thomas for a while here. So the Saints have kind of accumulated enough receivers around him. I know Jarvis Landry's been banged up and everything, but watching Chris Olave emerge has been great. Traquan Smith, Marquez Callaway are still there. So that part is good. I think the Ravens, though, as much as great as Mark Andrews is, and as nice as it was to see rookie Isaiah Likely break out on Thursday Night Football last week against the Buccaneers, the Ravens still, I think, need that second option. And the second option's been Devin Duvernay, but really it was Bateman earlier this year. You take out some drops, take out a fumble, right? I mean, those are some bad plays. That's going to hurt his PFF grade. We're talking about a guy that's over almost 2.5 yards per route run in limited sample this year. That's a huge number. Doesn't mean he was going to keep it up, but you see the potential that Bateman had. And part of this, losing him for the year, is losing the evaluation of Rashod Bateman too. Last year, he missed a bunch of time, only had 68 targets. And, we're going to be going to year 3 with a guy that's had fewer than 100 targets as your first round pick a couple years ago. So part of it is not knowing what Rashod Bateman really can be, what he could bring to that offense. And then, of course, the complementary option to Mark Andrews and letting Duvernay be that slot, gadget, mix it up type of player. I think the Ravens lose a little bit of versatility offensively without Bateman.
Yeah, that's definitely tough. The one thing that could change the dynamic in Baltimore is if DeSean Jackson comes in. They signed him midway through the season. He's been on the practice squad. If he gets activated and he actually looks like the DeSean Jackson of old, or not even old, but like for almost the entirety of his career, and he provides that deep threat, because the one thing I think you lose without Bateman is somebody that can stretch a defense vertically. As good as Mark Andrews is, and as functional as he can be as the team's number one receiving option, the one thing Mark Andrews is not really doing is stretching a defense vertically and stressing the back end and sort of banking everybody off the line of scrimmage. He can work the middle of the field and he can catch some passes deep on seams and those kinds of things, but it's not the same thing. And Rashod Bateman can come in there when he's there and provide that vertical threat and stretch a defense away from the line of scrimmage. That's what they miss if they're just relying on Mark Andrews being that number one guy. If DeSean Jackson can come in and provide that, even if that's all he provides, I think the Ravens passing game is okay with what they have and can kind of replace what they lost with the Rashod Bateman injury.
Picture it, Sam. Your kicker's lining up for an onside kick. The chances of regaining possession are slim. The stakes are high. Tension's higher. Your pulse is racing. He kicks it. It bounces high up into the air. And you can make every play feel this exciting with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. And their unbeatable offers. Right now, new customers can make any $5 NFL bet and get $200 in free bets if your team wins. Check it out. In addition to the usual bets, everyone can boost their winnings with DraftKings stepped-up same-game parlays. To make things even sweeter, you could throw down on those stepped up same game parlays once per game day all season long. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code PFF to get $200 in free bets if your team wins. Just place a $5 bet on any football game. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook using the code PFF. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details. So I'm with you on DeSean Jackson maybe changing the game. It's probably a little bit too much to rely upon at this point, but DeSean Jackson's defied time and age quite a bit throughout his career. So we'll see if he adds that deep threat. I want to ask about Michael Thomas, though, because we've now seen him for only 441 snaps back in 2020. He didn't take a snap last year in 21, and he was limited to 136 snaps this year. That was after 3 straight years of 90-plus grades and a 2019 season that saw him show he might just be quarterback-proof, too, not just a product of Drew Brees. He had the same grade with Teddy Bridgewater in that system. Michael Thomas, one of the best possession receivers of his era, and we've only seen him for about 600 snaps now over a 3-year period.
Yeah, I mean, it really sucks for him. And he's now reaching that age where you start to get a little bit concerned about wide receivers anyway. You know, he's 29 right now. He'll be 30 next season. You would already be reaching the point in his career where you're like, how much longer does Michael Thomas have? And now you're dealing with 3 years, essentially, of injuries. And one of them was the same injury for the majority of that time, all of which have been kind of concentrated on the lower extremities, shall we say, you know, foot, ankle, that kind of thing. Not a great area to be injured if you're a wide receiver. It's tough. Like his career has been completely derailed by these injuries, and that sucks for him. It sucks for the Saints. It sucks for everybody involved. It's tough to see, you know, how much longer you can keep stretching this out and rely on Michael Thomas going forward. To their credit, I don't think they really have, you know, as much as they built a wide receiver group that would be phenomenal if Michael Thomas was there, because all of a sudden, you know, Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, Jarvis Landry, the one guy you forgot.
Callaway.
No, the one guy you missed out on your kind of rundown of their receivers, the best graded New Orleans receiver this year, admittedly on 5 targets, Rashid Shaheed, the great speedster, you know. So they've built this group that could be a phenomenal collection of receivers if he was there as well. But I think what it also means is if you take him out, it's still a good collection of guys that can be functional and can be, you know, a wide receiver group in isolation. Like Michael Thomas would be incredible cherry on the top of this thing, but even without him, it's a pretty good, pretty functional wide receiver group that has I think a pretty complete skill set and can function. So it's a bummer for the Saints, but they were in this position where they don't really need him the way they did.
Yeah, so I think in the short term, you're right. Now the question is, the contract that he signed a couple years ago, he's got a couple massive cap numbers over the next couple seasons. So, yeah, I don't know what this does for Michael Thomas's career. You know, once looked upon, he was a different receiver than Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, DeAndre Hopkins, all those other top guys. Definitely more of the possession type. Some people think he ran too many slants, but you know, when you get open that often on slants, it doesn't matter. That is a skill. The Saints are going to have decisions to make over the next couple of years and how much they can rely upon him. So I think ultimately, which one is the bigger loss, Rashod Bateman or Michael Thomas? I'm leaning Bateman, not because Michael Thomas isn't a good player, but because we haven't seen him. We haven't seen him as part of the Saints offense for quite a while now. He had those 2 nice touchdown catches a few weeks back with Jameis Winston, but really hasn't been relied upon recently. And Bateman was the guy that the Ravens invested in. They haven't invested in a ton of receivers. Bateman was the guy that they were depending on to be their big play threat.
Yeah, I think it is Bateman because they don't have the contingency that the Saints have built up for this Michael Thomas thing. You know, we just ran through that New Orleans receiving core. That's not even factoring in, you know, Alvin Kamara, whatever else they want to do. They have a collection of receivers that are legit, even without Michael Thomas in the lineup. The Ravens don't. Like, they have Mark Andrews, who's still their number 1 guy. Nothing's changed there. Isaiah Likely, I think, is a good deputy for Mark Andrews, but doesn't necessarily function at the same time. But then their wide receiver group is maybe DeSean Jackson can step in and give them that deep threat. Maybe Duvernay, you know, it's a bunch of what ifs and potential, and maybe like they definitely have a hole without Rashod Bateman, even if that particular role is a smaller one than it would be in a different offense.
So unfortunate news this Thursday afternoon, Rashod Bateman and Michael Thomas both officially done for the season. Let us know who's the bigger loss for their respective teams.